Hi, and welcome to the GreenStaxx podcast, Thinking Inside the Box. I'm Julia Hansen, your host, and I'm the Director of Business Development and Partnerships at GreenStaxx. And in this mini-series of Thinking Inside the Box, I'm hosting conversations with key players in the development and deployment of GreenStaxx's triple-decker building design, which is one of two unit design libraries that GreenStaxx offers to developers. And our goal here is to share our experience using standardized, replicable unit designs so that we can help advance the modular multifamily industry. So today I'm here with GreenStaxx's COO, Gwen Noyes. Welcome to the podcast, Gwen.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And Gwen is not only our COO, but she is also the principal designer of our triple-decker line of unit designs. And she is here to tell us about the experience of developing this product line and what she's learned as not only the designer, but also the co-developer of two buildings that used this triple-decker design. And Gwen has also spent over 30 years on the board of the Cambridge Affordable Housing Trust. So Gwen, let's just get into it. What can you tell me about the genesis of the triple-decker design? And knowing that there are two projects that we can discuss today. One is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the other is in Lowell. But before we talk about the actual deployment of these designs in real life projects, what can you tell me about how your vision for a triple-decker design that's standardized, how did that come about?
Well, there's several things that brought me there. Living in a city, Cambridge, and primarily thinking about Boston, where there's this ongoing hue and cry. We need more housing. We need more affordable housing. We need to do what we can to work with the communities that are existing, and you don't have to do much touring around the city to know that there are a lot of sites, particularly in Boston, that are vacant and where there has been a triple-decker, but it's been torn down or burned down or whatever, and there are holes in the fabric of the community. So that was a very obvious observation. I have a little bit of a history thinking about this because I lived in a triple-decker, a tiny little one. They called them Father, Son, and Holy Ghost in Philadelphia, and they're ubiquitous. A row house with shared walls, and then windows in front and back. And I was very happy during my graduate years in this little house that cost $14,000 and and it was just fine. It is really the thought that we can build housing that's energy efficient and particularly well suited to modular building, which is what we're in. And it feels to me like as a product that has multiple opportunities to be not just a single triple decker, but also double, triple decker, and row houses, and with a little cleverness in design, making that be something that could be adaptable to the modular building process and made more and more energy efficient and more cost effective. It just seems like that's an opportunity that was there for me to.
So this really began as sort of a conceptual exercise for you. And so how did you end up finding your first project site for this design in Cambridge, Massachusetts?
Well, that's a funny thing. I was working in our office on this design, and it happens that we were Arthur, my husband and partner, we were interviewed on Channel 5 here in Boston for a project that was being built and completed in Newton, which is a modular building, multifamily, 68 units, I believe, and very, again, energy efficient, community oriented, and filling in a site that had been a parking lot. And it was just an interesting urbanistic kind of a project, again, near public transportation. So the Channel 5 was interviewing me and Arthur, and it happened that a lovely woman named Geraldine Small was watching the program, and she called me on the telephone and said, I have a property in Cambridge where the house burned down, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with it. My family have been there for generations, and she said it's in a community that was largely Caribbean people who had immigrated, and she wanted to hang on. This is a situation where she had the sense to know that generational wealth could be preserved if she hung on to the property, despite all the offers she had. And I was absolutely delighted. And in fact, I just talked to her about an hour ago. We are still friends, and she said, "Let's do this." And I showed her the plans that we'd been working on, that were already there. And she said, "This is what I'd like to do." And she said that she would like to do it passive. I was saying that's what I really want to do. I'd like to do a passive house. She was on board, and it was like eureka. How could you ask for anything falling in your lap? We started working on finding a contractor who was happy to work in Cambridge, and we talked with the company, the modular manufacturing company, and it wasn't long before we really were ready to go. There is a long lead up time, and we can talk about that later when you are planning these things. But we found a contractor who was willing to do it, and the architects that we normally work with were already on board. So that was the beginning of
Wow. So it sounded like you sort of just got sent this perfect site to test out an idea that you had already been working on, but which was still sort of a design in theory versus a design for a particular location.
Right. And the perfect person who was completely on board for green, she'd saved all the money for the insurance that they'd had when the building burned down. So it was just a perfect situation. The two of us went to the bank together with, to get the building financed, and there were no glitches that way. It was really great.
And were there any changes that you needed to do to the basic design that you had already worked up in order to make it fit this site, or was the site already the perfect size for what you had in mind with this triple decker design?
We did. It fits the site. It's the site, and we got the parking that we needed on it. But the site was an odd shape, and we did need to go through the special permit process. We had nobody objecting to it, but because the existing conditions for most of the projects, typical townhouses, are not conforming to current zoning, we needed to go through a special permit process, and our neighbors were supportive. So
Okay.
that's something you need to always check, obviously.
Right. And so I think a lot of people, especially if they're listening from Massachusetts, are very familiar with the triple decker design, or at least the triple deckers that are ubiquitous, which have been built 100 years ago or more. What is the same or different from your contemporary triple decker when it comes to layout or certain features, or like how did you bring that sort of up to date for the modern lifestyle?
Well, certainly making a building that's all electric and passive house, incredibly energy efficient. That's from the get-go is an interesting thing. It happens also that there is a code, relatively recent. I don't know when they brought this in, but if you have a sprinkler system in the building, you only need one set of stairs going for a three-story building, which saves a lot of space and made it pretty easy to have on the second and third floor 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. It's a very efficient layout, but being able to have good-sized bedrooms, it's an incredibly efficient floor plan.
Okay, great. And from a design perspective, what were your biggest learnings from having actually implemented your original triple decker design that fit so well onto this first site that where it was implemented?
Well, we pretty much used the same plan, but when we were putting two together, there were a couple windows on the sides that were eliminated. But given that that was where the stairwell was and the second bathroom in the plan, it was the Lowell project that has the party wall has people moved into the Cambridge project in the hot times of summer. When the temperature was scratching 100, some of the tenants who were the first tenants moving into this spanky new beautiful apartment and they came in with snazzy jobs at Harvard and so on. That was they had no experience living in a passive house. So the learning we had was that learning to set a thermometer of a temperature, the temperature controls at 75 or something like that, and leaving them there and not tinkering with it was something that a couple of the tenants just couldn't figure out. And we brought in our energy engineers and so on to make sure that everything was set right, and it was. But the kind of patience that is required to stay with a passive house energy saving system is something that a lot of people aren't used to.
Right.
So
Takes a bit of a learning curve.
That definitely has been a learning curve. And as I said, I just talked to her about an hour ago, and she said that she finally decided that the person who was most uncomfortable, who actually got sort of used to it, but she was still kind of a complainer. She said, I asked her, not to renew her lease. And she said the woman was at that point kind of used to being there, and she would like to stay. And said, I just didn't want to tinker with this all the time with a system that is really good. She is convinced that the system does work, and it just takes getting used to not having a blast of cold air.
Yeah, and that's something that we've all become very accustomed to, especially with all of our window units that we tend to use in Massachusetts. Well, Gwen, so that was your first experience in implementing your triple decker unit designs in real life in Cambridge. And you have another project that is nearly finished going up in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is not a single triple decker, but a double triple decker. Two triple deckers side by side. Can you tell me a little bit more about that project and how did that come about?
Well, I met a young fellow when we were finishing the Newton project that I mentioned earlier. He came to see what we were doing with modular and modular apartments, and he was very impressed. And I was impressed with the intelligence that he was exhibiting and how he was talking about the building. He seemed to be, time passed when we had conversations back and forth, and it seemed like the idea of trying another round of doing a triple decker or double triple decker in a new location, which certainly Lowell would be, that we kind of thought it would be a good venture to work on. So. And obviously Lowell has a completely different market situation than Cambridge does. So we knew from the get-go that we could not afford to do all the testing and design reviews and so on, and triple glazed windows and all the things that we did that were sort of planning and super building. That we did do in Cambridge, but we knew we could build a really high quality and very energy efficient all electric building in Lowell. So with rents that were considerably reduced, even so.
Compared to Cambridge.
Yeah, compared to Cambridge.
Hmm.
So we found a site that worked, that just fit our model again, and bought the property, and it's now just about ready for occupancy. Very close. I was there this morning, and it's looking great. It's really very rewarding to see, with just a few tiny tweaks. It's going to be a very high quality home for 6 people, 6 families, or whatever.
Yeah. And so again, thinking with your architect's hat on, what were the types of modifications that you needed to consider from architecture and engineering perspective? So you talked about not having all of the passive house features, but still being very energy efficient, still meeting the Massachusetts stretch code. Were there anything else change about the building dimensions or anything to do with like the siding or the walls or any part of like the structural engineering of the building to account for the fact that instead of just having one triple decker on its own, now you had two side by side?
Okay, well, from an energy standpoint, having one major wall be shared between the two, there's a get-go benefit, even though it's not being designed for passive house, the energy consumption of any of those 3 apartments on each side will be reduced from what it would be with the single triple decker. That's one thing. We made a few little design tweak changes that make it give some extra storage to the second and third floor that they didn't have before. So the kitchen arrangement was somewhat more efficient. Obviously, where a window was in the bathroom, one of the bathrooms, that it was on the stair side of the building, that was lost because of the common wall. But basically, the apartments are entirely enjoyable to be in, and some of the amenities that you don't normally see, which is a door on the second and third floor that opens out to a tiny little Juliet balcony, but you can stand and breathe the air from the outside. So other than that, it's still all electric. It's still very energy efficient. We will do the blower door test in a week or so. And we saved some money by not having a full basement. It has a crawl space, so it's energy efficient, but a crawl space is less expensive to build than a full basement, more expensive than having just a slab on grade. It's ready for solar panels to be on the roof, which we hope to. It's been designed so that we can run all the cables for that.
Okay. Do you think that should this project be, or should the triple decker, the next time that it's implemented, do you think that there will be further tweaks on the design, sort of the interior design layout, or do you feel like at this point you've really perfected what this standardized product could be?
I think the layout is very well refined. If a site were longer than what we are dealing with, you could add a couple feet to either the bedrooms or the living room without a huge cost change for the building. So that's a possibility. But in terms of practical use in the bathrooms and the kitchen and so on, I think it's really hard to what needs to be modified. I think the people who come through say this is great. So I haven't heard any substantial recommendations of what we need to change.
That's great to hear. And I'm sure folks listening will appreciate knowing that this product has been kind of, like any product that's under development, you launch a first version and then you could go back and make some changes, but eventually you get to a product version that is really market ready and ready to go. So it sounds like that's where we are with this particular product line. So Gwen, thinking now more about the process of getting these buildings online. So you mentioned working with a modular manufacturer and a GC or a CM for each of these projects too, doing the button up and the site work. I believe that you had a different modular manufacturer for Cambridge and for Lowell, as well as a different construction manager for each project. So I'm wondering if you can talk about you were able to get these two different partners for the two different projects up to speed with the most, I guess, critical piece of modular construction, which is keeping everybody in the right sort of level of communication in order to prevent misunderstandings about the boxes, the scheduling, submittals, RFIs. So what was your experience for each of these projects? And were there any learnings that you took from your partners in construction from Cambridge, and were you able to do better the second round in Lowell with a different set of partners?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah, big question. Point number one that anybody working with a factory needs to appreciate, and that is that they have a schedule, and that in order to get into their schedule, first of all, they have to have availability, and we've heard that with our second factory that they're booked up through the end of 2025. So that's a critical thing just from the get-go. There's a lot of pre-planning that needs to happen with any modular project. Because once they get it on the line, they want to put everything in, have everything ready to go, all the plumbing, lighting, everything is that you're putting in, and that's something we haven't talked about that a lot of people aren't aware of. But the modular building, such as we have, has all the finishes in the building when it comes off the line, all the kitchens, cabinets, and counters, and lighting and toilets and towel bars, everything is there. We even have the flooring, which is one of those things that you can talk about whether it's good or not to have the flooring in, but if to have baseboards and the flooring down is one of the advantages you can do. But going back to your question about the things you need to be thinking about, certainly the having laid out so that the modular building people can see what you're looking for and negotiate with you if they can get what you're looking for, or if they have something that is as good and that you're perfectly happy to use. That's a long and arduous process just to go ticking through everything and making sure that what you're getting is what you want. It's all worthwhile, obviously, because once they put it on the line and they've got all that stuff there, you've got a box in like a week. So it'll come off the line. So because of everything being thought out ahead of time.
So did you have an experience on the first project that you really learned from, that you were able to do in the second one in Lowell?
So the first project we did was with a very capable and conscientious contractor who has done a lot of housing but hadn't done modular, was willing to do this and was willing to learn about it. But he didn't have a lot of early negotiations with the factory. The factory wasn't asking for him to come up and see what was going on, and so there was a lot of learning on site about how to fish the wires out and so on that needed to be that obviously were looped and ready to be joined. But the button-up process between the boxes is something that takes very patient and diligent and smart people to figure out how to get all the plumbing and the wiring that is provided in coils, but it has to be ready to go, and the way it's strung between the boxes needs to be thought out, and that we have gotten pretty good about anticipating what they need and how it should be done, and our architects are cognizant of all that, but the contractor needs to be patient and able and bring in people who can work with them that know how to do this. And this is one of the big humps that as a profession, the construction people, managers, there's not a lot of experience out there in the world, in our world, and at least in this country, of contractors who have built modular buildings, put them together, done the button up, it's called, and are comfortable knowing what's going to be done. So one of the expenses that is the contractors have to cover for their ignorance of how to do this and their concern of what the learning curve that they're going to be on. And we had a very competent contractor in the first building who was willing to do that, and he still needed to charge for extra work that he hadn't anticipated. The second building that we're doing in Lowell, we had a contractor who has done modular building before and was more comfortable with what the challenges are, and had very few issues where he had to open up walls to pull out the wires that were not where he thought they were going to be, things like that. And he participated in conversations before the modules were being built on the line. So he on top of what was going to arrive on the property. 2 days. In 2 days, all the boxes, 12 boxes, were placed, and then it was his to figure out what to do. And he had participated in conversations with the factory prior to their being built, and also had some experience in doing this before. So this is a critical piece of what we need to be doing in the profession, in the building profession, is besides recognizing the potential for modular building, is generating a group of contractors who are skilled in doing the button-up part and aren't charging outrageous extra fees to cover their ignorance. And and sometimes you'll find that things are provided by the factory that the contractor thought he was going to need to do himself, and so you're paying for the same materials twice, or the other way around. One, pointing, I thought you were going to do it. No, you were supposed to do this, and so the communication before the boxes are built in the factory between the contractor and the modular manufacturer need to be good enough that all these questions are covered.
Right. And it sounds like in Lowell, you were much more successful in getting that communication to happen earlier so that when the boxes were delivered, the GC was ready to go.
Yeah.
Knew where he needed to be in order to do all of the various button-up tasks.
We did have one glitch about Canadian standards for plumbing that were different from what we thought we'd provided in the way of drawings. So that glitch happens, but it was in terms of the overall project. Both the Canadians and our local contractor were pretty happy with it. In fact, the quality of everybody recognizes that the quality of the construction with the boxes is just superb. So that part is an ongoing benefit that everybody acknowledges.
Yeah, and that just goes to to provide more evidence about the benefits of modular generally. The quality of construction these days from modular manufacturing is really, really high. And so that's just another reason that it's worth it to go through all of this extra communication and making sort of moving parts of the typical construction process further up into your project's timeline in order to make sure that they happen right, in order to get a really high quality product at the end.
And now it turns out that we may be going back to the first contractor. We don't know but we have two contractors, the Canadian and this main modular manufacturer. When I say contractor, I meant not modular manufacturer, both of whom have produced very high quality products. And we think that the benefits of having those two factories know what we do and know what this product is going to accrue benefits in terms of cost savings in the very next project. This is where the benefits really start adding up.
Right. With that accumulated experience and replication of products or projects using the same team over and over again.
Yep. Yeah.
So, Gwen, just to wrap us up here, I would love to go back to your experience on the Cambridge Affordable Housing Trust. How do you feel like that has influenced your work as an architect and developer over the years, and did it show up in any particular way with the triple decker?
Actually, the Cambridge Affordable Housing Trust is a pretty unique organization within anywhere, because it's committed to providing affordable housing in many, modest assistance to very deep assistance, and high quality housing, and throughout the city, and almost always multifamily, and very often, considerable number of units, but sometimes a lower number in rehabs and so on. I think the level of commitment for finding sites and providing the builders, there's several CDCs, the extra boost of funding to make it possible to do the good work that they do, which, when you think about it, the building cost is often the biggest. It's the cost of money, the cost of having an organization, the expense of running the community development organizations is so considerable that I have a lot of empathy for the people who really have to go after the money sources and do amazing amount of work that has nothing to do with actual building. But that said, the part that I played, and aside from reviewing projects, was I always encouraged the buildings that we put up in Cambridge to be as energy efficient as possible. And now almost everyone is passive house being built, and with a very large building on Concord Avenue. The Foster, I think it's called, is 120, maybe, all passive. This is
wow.
Cambridge is certainly in the foreground and way out in front of most communities, not only in the percentage of affordable housing that we provide in the city, but also the quality. So Cambridge is an incredibly fortunate community to have the economics of MIT and Harvard, and the businesses that they generate, and making it be just a good economy to build in. So it's hard to say that this is an example that many communities can follow, because we tend to have such a strong quadruple A economy in Canada. So all I can say is that while I was on the trust, I encouraged the frequency and depth of energy efficiency in our buildings.
Yeah. And that certainly came through when you had the chance to design something from scratch and partner with folks to do some projects.
Yeah.
Well, Gwen, thank you so much for your time. This was a really enlightening conversation, and I loved hearing the genesis of the triple decker product line, as well as how it was able to be implemented in two very different scenarios. very successfully, it seems. And as you know, our next guest will be with the co-developer of the project in Lowell. So we'll get to speak with him a little bit more about his experience as a developer accessing standardized modular ready plans for the first time. So you've set us up really well for that conversation, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for listening to the GreenStaxx podcast, Thinking Inside the Box. Please remember to subscribe if you enjoyed this episode and leave any questions. The future is modular.